When we talk about socioeconomic inequality, it's usually in the context of the wealthy versus the poor, and how a person's level of wealth affects their opportunities and privileges in society. But the term socioeconomic, it's meant to include factors other than wealth that affect a person's status. Things like educational attainment or race, for example. But there's another socioeconomic factor that never seems to be mentioned by the talking heads when they're ranting and raving about socioeconomic inequality and the class divide and all that. Everybody just seems to be concerned about the divide between rich and poor or between rural and urban. But the socioeconomic factor I want to dive into today is looks. How attractive a person is. Because a person's level of attractiveness is an extremely influential factor in regards to a person's place in the social hierarchy. Here's a basic description of socioeconomic inequality I found online. Socioeconomic inequality refers to the unequal distribution of resources, opportunities, and privileges within a society based on factors such as wealth, income, education, and social status. Now, typically, when academics or so-called intellectuals speak about socioeconomic factors, they're talking about things like income, age, marital status, family size, religion, occupation, education, ethnicity, etc. And those certainly are socioeconomic factors. Those are things that can affect your quality of life and your access to wealth and resources, but so is your looks. But all the academics, policymakers, economists, philosophers, and whoever else it is that concerns themselves with these things, they never talk about looks. They never talk about a person's level of attractiveness. And ultimately, I think that's because most people think of class as ultimately just being a matter of wealth. If you're wealthy, then you're in the upper class. If you're poor, then you're in the lower class. And so everybody's just tunnel vision focused on the money aspect. And also, most of the socioeconomic factors you hear about commonly in the mainstream media, they're all things that they either map one-to-one to a legally defined protected status, like race and nationality and age and religion, or they're just things that very obviously correlates with a person's level of wealth, like occupation. So looks, a person's level of attractiveness, is usually ignored. Pretty much always ignored in any discussions of socioeconomic inequality. Partially because it's not one of the legally recognized protected statuses, partially because it's something that is relatively difficult to quantify. It's easy to quantify what a person's age is or what their race or occupation is, but there is at least a little bit of subjectivity when we talk about looks. But the biggest reason I think looks is ignored in these discussions is because of this tunnel vision hyper-focus on money. But socioeconomics is not all about money. And when you really break it down, it isn't about money at all, or it shouldn't be. Monetary wealth only relates to class in the sense that monetary wealth is probably the biggest factor controlling a person's access to resources. But the resources themselves, the things you buy with the money, that's what it's all about. Access to resources. If you could attain valuable resources without money, then money would not be a part of the discussion. And I do have a point with all of this, by the way. I'm not just being pedantic. One of the most valuable resources, arguably the most valuable resource, is people, humans. Specifically, to any man, the love and affection of a beautiful woman is the most valuable resource there is. And women also value love and affection from a man as a resource, so romantic interest from the opposite sex, that is access to resources. And it also plays into some of the other more commonly accepted socioeconomic factors like family size and marital status. But it is clear that your level of attractiveness, much like your level of monetary wealth, is something that is a predictor of your access to resources. And I get why nobody's talking about this. It's hard to quantify. It's not politically correct. But this is important. And it's unfortunate that it's really just a select few of us unattractive men on the internet that talk about these things. And of course, we get labeled as incels, misogynists, morons, whatever. But I don't want to keep harping on about how unfair it all is that nobody cares. So I'll just say this before I move on. Ugly men, sub 5 men, listen, we have to be our own advocates. We are part of an invisible underclass, and things are only getting worse for us. It's not getting better, and nobody is going to help us but ourselves. Okay? So we have to advocate for ourselves. So now that that's out of the way, moving on. Looks is a major socioeconomic factor, but it also transcends socioeconomics in a way. For example, a beautiful woman that is born into poverty, or let's even say a beautiful woman with every commonly accepted socioeconomic factor not being in her favor. So she's poor, she's of a minority race, minority nationality, minority religion, low level of educational attainment, everything. So all the cards are stacked against her except for her looks. Well, how this plays out in reality, this beautiful woman might be born into the lower class, but her beauty gives her access to the most valuable resource of all, love and affection from the opposite sex. So for this lower class beautiful woman, she probably won't stay in the lower class. She can easily marry a wealthy upper class man, and she can move up the socioeconomic ladder just like that. So just from her looks, she was afforded the privilege of access to nearly any eligible bachelor she desired. And ultimately, that gives her access to actual monetary wealth and resources and everything else that goes along with it. So in many cases, for women especially, looks equates to wealth. And I don't think any other socioeconomic factor is powerful in quite the same way. And for men, everything I said about how a beautiful woman can rise in socioeconomic class through her looks, I think that does apply to men as well, albeit to a much lesser degree, because a woman doesn't have to be a 10 out of 10 beautiful to marry up into the higher class. Even an average-looking woman can marry up, although her level of attractiveness will affect her options. But for a man to use his looks to rise up to a higher socioeconomic class, he does need to be exceptionally attractive. But that also is kind of missing the point, I think, when it comes to men. And maybe I'm actually leaving the realm of socioeconomic discourse with this, but I think it applies. So think of it like this. Let's do a thought experiment. Imagine you are given the choice between two lives. In one life, you are born into wealth, but you are very unattractive. You are facially deformed to the level that it makes people physically uncomfortable to look at you. But you are rich, so you never have to worry about things like paying the bills. You can afford to live wherever you want, and you can move around and travel freely. You know, the world is your oyster. You are a wealthy man. And let's even say that if you want to work a career that you find meaningful, you can do that too, because let's say you have industry connections through your family. And again, you are filthy rich. So You can easily hire professional working women, women of the night to take care of you, to take care of your needs, if that's what you want to do. But you are so unattractive, the chances are slim to none that you will ever find a woman that will actually love you. And friendship is hard to come by too, because again, you're so ugly that it actually makes people physically uncomfortable to even look at you. Okay, so that's option one. You're wealthy but ugly. Option two is the opposite of that. You're flat broke, but you're extremely attractive. And for the sake of this thought experiment, let's just say that you can't rise out of poverty no matter what you do. Realistically, a highly attractive man has an advantage in finding employment and possibly marrying up, but let's ignore that. So you go through life living in mobile homes, sketchy apartments, maybe even living out of your car sometimes, and you're poor. You are broke. You're struggling to get by. But in this scenario, option two, women are just throwing themselves at you left and right. You got a new chick sleeping over in your mobile home or in your car every other night, and these women like you too. They aren't just sleeping with you. They actually like you. So you can play the field if you want, or you can settle down with the woman of your choice. It's your option, whatever you want to do. But you cannot marry your way out of poverty or use any of these women for financial gain in any way. Okay? Just for this thought experiment. Okay, so again, option one, you're filthy rich, but you're dog ugly. And option two, you're flat broke, but you have model tier good looks and all the women in the world. Which option would you choose? I think most men would choose option two. Most men would take the women over the riches. And let me know in the comments if you disagree with that. But I think option two is the obvious choice for most men. So the point I'm trying to make with this thought experiment, we tend to think of socioeconomic status like lower class, middle class, upper class. We typically think of these things in terms of monetary wealth. But it's not just about wealth. Money it's really just a proxy for resources. Resources is what it's actually about. And one of the most valuable resources of all is human affection and human attention and human respect. And what goes along with that, it's the ability to influence people. These things are very difficult to quantify, but they are resources. Humans are resources, and they are valuable resources. And monetary wealth, obviously, it can help you attain human affection, influence, attention, and all of that, but so can looks. Your looks, your level of attractiveness, is a form of currency that you can use to acquire one of the most valuable resources in the world. So really, I think the whole paradigm that most discussions of socioeconomic inequality are framed under, it's just not the right way of thinking about things. If you want to analyze socioeconomic inequality and you actually want to do something about it, then you have to be honest about how you're quantifying these things. Because looks is a factor, and it's a big factor. And it's also being ignored by pretty much every academic institution, public intellectuals, policymakers, whatever, whoever. Nobody is even considering how a person's looks affects their socioeconomic status. And frankly, I think if some academic or whatever did listen to this, they listen to what I'm saying right now, they would just brush it off like as if what I'm saying is just ridiculous or something. Because I don't think the powers that be want to acknowledge this. And even if they were open about it, the truth about looks is something that is really hard to accept, and it's just something that's really hard to even believe if you have not experienced it for yourself. It's just not something that most people could comprehend if they haven't lived it. So that's really about all I have to say about this topic, but I just think we're doing a big injustice to ourselves as a society if we continue to neglect the importance and all the influence that each person's looks, their level of attractiveness, the influence that has on a person's socioeconomic status, if we continue to neglect this, we're just not doing the proper analysis. We're just not doing the proper analysis. And there is a lot of socioeconomic inequality in this world. And I can only really speak for the United States of America because that's where I'm from and that's where I've spent my entire life. There's a lot of socioeconomic inequality in this country. And the inequality is something that, and everybody recognizes this. It's a big problem. It causes depression. It causes anxiety. And you know what they say, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And that's true. And that is an aspect that is exacerbated by increasing levels of socioeconomic inequality. But if we ever want to do something, we want to try to solve all this inequality, what do we have to do? We have to study it. We have to look at things. We have to analyze things. We have to analyze the data. We have to analyze all of the factors involved that determine, that controls a person's socioeconomic status. And looks, your level of attractiveness is a socioeconomic factor. It's a big one, okay? It's a big factor. Listen, if you're an intellectual, if you're an academic, if you're somebody that has it within your ability to, hey, take a look at this, do a study or something, do even one study about how a person's level of attractiveness affects their socioeconomic status. Because this needs to be looked at. This is an issue that needs to be tackled, okay? So, hey, progressives, hey, socialists, whoever's listening to this, maybe you'd be the ones that I would think should be more sympathetic to this type of thing. Get on it, okay? Don't ignore this, all right? Do not ignore this. It is important. You consider everything else about a person to be a socioeconomic factor, their race, their ethnicity. You consider everything else, all protected statuses. And frankly speaking, looks should be considered a protected status. It should be a legally protected class, if anything is going to be, because it just so happens your level of attractiveness is probably the biggest thing that people are most commonly discriminated against. And let's add height to the list, although that is just in some ways kind of a aspect of a person's level of attractiveness, for men specifically. Doesn't affect women so much, possibly a bit. Hey, university researchers, economic researchers in the private sector, whoever you are, look into this. Looks, socioeconomic factor, it's one of them, okay? We've got to study these things. Loser maxing out.